Welcome to a new episode of Opening Bid. I'm Yahoo Finance Executive Editor Brian Sozzi. Now let's make some money and get a lot smarter. Very special guest is sitting next to me right now. Business journalism legend. I wrote this down beforehand. A true one of the kind. The one, the only Mr. Alan Sloan. It's good to see you. I've followed you for decades, but I've never actually met you in person, Alan.
Well, now you have, and I hope I'm not disappointing you
No,
and the audience, especially with my Brooklyn accent.
No, I was telling my office, you, sir, the Babe Ruth of business journalism.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. In many respects, I'm doing this because of folks like yourself. So I'm very honored to have you here. And to that end, what recently caught my attention, you still contribute. You're still out there writing. You're contributing to Yahoo Finance. And I loved your story that's on our site right now. I encourage everyone to check this out. Warren Buffett is turning 94 next month. Should investors start to worry? Should they?
The answer is, well, if they're not worried before, there's no reason to worry now. And what prompted that was actually Hank Gilman, one of your subordinates.
Love that guy.
Yeah, me too. Saying, why don't you write something about this? So I went and did some actual research. You've heard of research?
I have.
Right?
I don't know if a lot of other people have, though.
But a few years ago, my wife and I bought a relatively modest piece of Berkshire Hathaway. Back in the day when it was really hot. I couldn't buy it because we were writing about it and it was a conflict. So I guess in 2016, after I was long gone and became self-employed, we bought it. And when I sat down to prepare for the story, I discovered to my shock that the return my wife and I had gotten on our stock in Berkshire Hathaway was actually less than the S&P 500 return.
Really?
For the same period. Yeah.
So much for stock picking.
Well, yeah. And so much for it having been a wonder stock. If you read the annual report of Berkshire, and I have a zillion of them in my office at home, there's this number of a vast outperformance of the S&P dating back, I can't remember to what year when Buffett took control, but that hasn't been true for at least 7 years and maybe even longer. But that's the perception is that it's been a great stock, and it wasn't a great stock for my wife and me.
But I'm still sitting here, and I can't help but to think I'm sitting next to a multi-billionaire.
Well, I mean, Warren isn't here, is he?
Oh, no, I'm talking about you, Mr. Alan Sloan. It's okay. Well, lunch is on you after this. So I would qualify you as a long-term holder. You wrote in the piece, you bought shares of Berkshire June 7th. My notes are a little funky, 2016.
Right.
So do you think about Berkshire after Buffett, and does that concern you when Buffett's no longer at the helm?
No, it doesn't concern me because Buffett, in effect, hasn't been at the helm for years. Just like when Charlie Munger, who I actually knew and liked and had a lot of respect for, when he died last year, I think it was, late last year, the question became, well, should you sell your Berkshire? And I realized that he really hadn't been playing that big a role in it for years, so it didn't matter. I mean, it mattered because I like him, and it mattered for perception, but it didn't matter for economic reality. And there's a successor for Buffett who's running the place, and he'll run it the same way after Buffett goes as he's running it now. And I don't know what role, if any, Buffett plays in this. And since he and I don't talk anymore to each other for reasons I won't bore you with.
No, what is it like to talk to these guys?
Well,
not a lot of listeners who are watching or listening to this on Spotify, YouTube, or on Yahoo Finance have ever had the opportunity to talk to a Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger. Ahead of that meeting, how do you prepare?
Well, I prepared by figuring out what I want to know, and then I just talk. I treat them like I treat anybody, just like I'm treating you like I would treat anybody.
Well, I'm only a multimillionaire.
Well, then you should be lucky I'm speaking to you at all. You just figure out what it is you think you want, mm-hmm. and the idea is you want to get them going, and then you want to shut up. because I know what I think. What matters is what they think. And my interviews with everyone I interview is the same pattern. I try to find something they're interested in and get it going. That's what you do. Since I'm, as I call myself, a recovering English major, I never studied any of the stuff in college or graduate school, except, as I've said, I was a straight A economics student in college, but I took only one course. But if people don't ask, I don't tell them how many courses I took.
Any funny stories from talking to Charlie Munger?
Well, nothing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
But they were just hilarious conversations. They were very funny. I don't remember them. But I remember getting along with them very, very well and just having fun. And I never idolized any of these people. I tried not to demonize the people I was writing about, and I tried not to idolize them. They're subjects. They're just people.
It's hard not to, this whole next generation of journalists, I would argue it's hard for them not to idolize some of these folks. I imagine that's a big no-no and a big mistake if you want to make this your profession.
Well, when I was younger, I'm closing in on being 80 years old. When I was 30, 40, and 50 years ago, really writing the stuff and really working more than full time on it, there were people who idolized the subjects. There have always been people who idolize the subjects. What you want to do is speak not to the subjects, but to your audience, whoever your audience is. And that's what I've always tried to do, is to say, if I were out there listening to me or reading what I write, what is it I want to know? And that's what I try to deal with. And I guess you probably haven't read most of what I've written, because there's been so much of it.
You've done it. You've been a prolific writer, sir. But I vividly remember reading a lot of your work when I was in school. And here's what I would do: your work, and even Michael Santoli over at Barron's, when he was still at Barron's, writing that column when you opened up the actual physical paper. I guess I'm dating myself now a little bit too. I would write every word down, because a lot of those words I was not taught in school, and that's how I ultimately got better.
Well, it's a question of practice. And I just learned, I got into business writing by accident, because I was down in Charlotte, North Carolina with my wife, who has put up with me now for 55 years and counting. And after we were down there originally, we were living separately. But after we got married, I was a sports writer. She was a elementary school teacher in a town near Charlotte, and I wanted to get to see her. The sports writers worked at night and weekends, and teachers don't work at night and weekends. So I went to the people there and I said, I'd like to be able to see my wife. I want to become a feature writer. And they said, well, we'll let you become the housing writer. I knew nothing about housing. I knew nothing about business. I said, okay. And I went out and I started to read and I started to learn. And a bunch of people in Charlotte, now this is more than 50 years ago, when Charlotte was a really small town. Now it's a big metropolitan city. It was a small town. I had a heavy Brooklyn accent. People like me were not really there in Charlotte, but they decided that I was worth dealing with. And to give you the cleaned up version of a classic conversation I had, if one of them said to me, if you're going to kick us, it should at least be for the right reasons, and decided to teach me. And they taught me stuff, and I learned from it. And I dealt with them politely. I always told them what I was doing. I always tell everybody when I can what I'm doing, and if you think it's wrong, tell me now. Mm-hmm. And that set the whole pattern, and learning it. And
well, how'd you go from sports, I guess, to business? How'd you make that transition? How'd you even identify it to do that?
Well, I didn't identify it. They told me I was a housing writer. Mm-hmm. And Charlotte was a hot market back in 1969, or I guess this was. It was a hot housing market. And most of the coverage had been, idolizing the people building homes. And I just wanted to go see what the stories were. I'd go around and I'd talk to people and I'd listen and I'd learn. And since my accent and my attitude put off a lot of people, I would print out documents and take them home and read them. Mm-hmm. And this is before we had children. So, I'd just sit there and read them and figure them out and go call people. And somebody from the bank who decided, as I said, to help me learn stuff would occasionally help me figure it out. And I would explain it in simple English, what I call a language approaching English, because that's how I did it, because I never studied the formal, I never took the formal courses. So I just saw what was there and tried to explain it to myself and also explain it to the readers, and I'm still doing that all these years later.
Hang with us, Alan. We're going to go for a quick break. I want to get a lot more into your career, and I want to go back to Berkshire for a minute, too. We'll be right back after this short break. All right, welcome back to Opening Bid. Really sitting down with an OG in business journalism, and I think really you've really helped me get into my own career, because I didn't have that journalism background either. I spent 10, 11 years as a stock analyst, Alan. But I want to get back to Berkshire and tie that in a bow. What is it about Berkshire's culture, given all your years covering the company, that you think will be so enduring that you can say, I'm not going to sell this stock? Because I think once Warren Buffett leaves, for whatever reason, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised. The world of investing is going to be very surprised.
Well, Berkshire doesn't have a culture. Okay, it's a small number of people in Omaha presiding over heaven only knows what, a zillion different subsidiaries, most of which have nothing to do with each other. And they run pretty much by themselves because there's no supervision, because there's no headquarters staff, or there's no headquarters staff to speak of. So it is what it is. And Buffett passing from the scene, whether he retires or dies or whatever, I don't think it's going to make much difference. And if you really want to do a deep analysis of Berkshire, which I'm not doing, and you would go look at all the parts, figure out what they are, figure out what they're worth, look at the balance sheet of Berkshire, and try to decide if Berkshire is worth more or less than the sum of the parts. It's what I call a belief stock now for a lot of people. It's people think Warren is running it, and maybe he is, but I don't think he is. But he does publish very funny and interesting long annual reports.
They're still
every year.
good.
They're still good.
Yeah.
And my friend Carol Loomis used to edit them. She and I worked together at Fortune. I don't know if she still does.
A true legend.
She is really something. She's even older than me, if such a thing is possible. But, and he's very funny, and they have these annual meetings, which I've never gone to, that are a spectacle. After he passes, I don't know that Greg Abel who is going to be able to do that, but that there's, it's a spectacle, and it's fun, and you get to read what Buffett has to say. It's interesting. It has nothing to do with the company, but it's interesting, and it's part of the, to use the Midwestern term, shtick.
Yeah.
It's the Buffett shtick, and whatever.
As someone that has won seven Gerald Loeb Awards, and for you guys not familiar, this is really one of the highest honors you can get in our field of business journalism. How do you make of how media is covering this election? And maybe you could compare it to how it covered the prior election of Trump versus Hillary Clinton.
Oh, don't get me started on that. I think the coverage has been, not every person and not every story, but the coverage has been basically horrendous. Suddenly, we're reading all these stories that say, well, we always knew that Biden was old and creaky. Well, if you knew Biden was old and creaky, why didn't you write that at the time instead of waiting for the creakiness to show up in this debate and then everyone piles on? And the thing with Trump, with whom I had horrendous relationships when I worked in New York for a New York paper called New York Newsday, and I wrote about Trump, and Trump hated me because I actually went and looked at what he was doing as opposed to what he was saying.
Did he bully you on the phone?
He tried to.
What's that like?
I don't care. I come from Brooklyn. I don't take nonsense from anybody. And there's a whole tale that I don't want to get into here of the last time we spoke where in the end, I was tired of him. He told me I couldn't believe a word he said because when I say I'm buying, I'm selling. When I say I'm selling, I'm buying. I said, well, then why should I believe a word out of your mouth now? And then I cursed him and I slammed down the phone. And I'm sitting in the newsroom and people are just staring. Well, that's how you have to deal with him. And if I were writing about him politically, which I wouldn't, I would go over his business career, which, by the way, has been largely a failure. And the thing I think that made him was that TV show,
The Apprentice.
The Apprentice. I think that's what made him, because that's when the world outside of New York heard of him. In New York, everyone used to laugh at him, in the upper echelons. But then he did that, and he turns out to be a great showman.
Mm-hmm. You hear media talking a lot about how this election or how former President Trump is a potential threat to democracy. Do you see it that way?
I have no idea. This isn't what I do. I don't like Trump. I don't care for Trump. But I'm not politically motivated. This is not my specialty. You get a political writer here. I'm not a political writer.
How should a business reporter cover it? Because what we hear is we hear these discussions. Trump lower taxes, Democrats higher taxes bad for stocks, more regulations.
Well, back when he was failing, I guess in the middle of his first term, I sat down with a friend of mine, and we wrote a thing for, ProPublica, about how it turned out nothing he said was true. He said, well, I'm going to eliminate the debt. And instead he added to it. He was going to do this, but he did that. He was going to do that, but he did this. And what you have to do is go over what he does as opposed to what he says. But that requires thinking, it requires analysis, and it requires having the bravery to put up with abuse. You have to look at what he did. And I'm not all that impressed with what he did.
You cover a lot of, I love your byline on Yahoo Finance, Alan. You cover a lot of different things. It seems like you just have a nose for news. You just follow what catches your eye. What's the next biggest business story you think we need to know more about?
Well, if I knew that, I'd be writing it.
We're still going to pay you. You can tell us. It's all right.
I don't know. It's a kind of thing where everybody, one of the things that really can make you annoyed if you take this seriously is after the fact, everybody says, well, we knew that. After the fact, everyone's a genius. I don't know what the story is. I don't know what's going to happen to the economy. I don't know any of this. On rare occasions, very rare occasions, I've made calls, most of which people didn't like. Like I called the internet bubble very early because it was just crazy, but wherever I was working, they didn't want to print it.
How do you find inspiration now?
Well, I just look at what's going on. I read, I think, I talk to people, and while we're at it, one of my good friends and one of my best market sources tells me when there's one particular stock that I have a very large personal investment in, my wife and I, that was recommended by this friend of mine, and it's running up and down, just like crazy. And I said, what is going on here? And he talked to me about algorithms. Do you know what algorithms are?
Yeah.
Algorithmic
trading, yeah.
Right. He said what's going on in the market primarily now are algorithms, where the computers, for whatever reason, are deciding to buy or sell something, and then they flip it back and forth. And then people in our profession, I assume I'm still a journalist.
You are.
they try to find some rational reason for something that isn't rational. And that's one of the things that I find annoying, but I never liked daily stock market stories because the point, and I know that you have to do this and people at Yahoo Finance do it, But when you're writing a story, you can't say, well, the market went up, but I have no idea why.
You have to, find a reason. Bond yields were down.
Right. Or so-and-so. We can, we have 700 people on our list of contacts, and we'll call someone until we get a good explanation, and then we quote this person. But, to me, it's a lot of it is just random and craziness.
I think back, let's just say NVIDIA. I mean, this stock has now captured hang on a minute. So this has now captured the minds of many investors and markets, you name it. This is probably one of the most popular stocks in the market right now. Are folks like myself contributing to this? Do I need to be more skeptical of a company that's clearly making a lot of money and doing a lot of things right?
What you need to do is understand it. What I've written, and again, I'm not a techie. I'm such a non-techie that one of my granddaughters programs my iPhone. Okay, that's what.
Good granddaughter.
Well. Yeah. She's okay. I don't know. I don't understand. I mean, I could write a story if I had to, but I don't understand the technology. I don't understand what the competitors are. I don't understand this. I don't understand that. And there's this wild enthusiasm for the stock. And since I own a ton of S&P 500 and total stock market index funds, I've benefited from it. And I wrote a piece for someone, I don't think it was you, about how if you had started out 5 years ago with $10,000 in the Vanguard S&P 500
I love
funds.
those stories.
Did you see that? Yeah. Here's what it was. It was $50 then, and then when I looked, it was like $1,200.
You want to get me to click, Alan? Write those stories. I'm sold.
But this is what happens. I don't know how you cover it because I don't understand it. And the daily stories, well, it goes up and it goes down. How do you do that? How do you figure it out?
It's hard. I will tell you that. So we have about 2 minutes left. Any advice to the next generation of journalists?
Yeah.
Starting out today, getting out of school, and maybe they're listening to this and they want to see themselves in this seat decades down the line.
Right. We'll try to figure out what's going on. Try to understand the fundamentals of what's happening. Don't get carried away by great quotes. Hope that maybe you're lucky enough to work at a place where there are more experienced people who will talk to you. I was fortunate that way, and I'd like to think along the way I repaid that by helping other people. You go to a place that values truth and values explanations as opposed to valuing hype. Now, I don't know how do you find that these days, given the bifurcated nature of the country and given social media and all of that.
Well, they can all send their applications to Yahoo Finance. I mean, we're a good place to be.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I want a fee. No, that's what you do. You got to figure this out, or try to figure it out, and write it, and just be careful and realize you're on a learning curve and that you don't know everything. And sooner or later, you may figure it out, or you may figure out you don't want to do it. But give it a chance, try to figure it out, and try to be honest with both your audience and yourself.
Well said, sir. This was a real treat, a real honor for me to welcome you into the Yahoo Finance headquarters for the first time. Thank you. You gave us a lot to think about.
My pleasure, Brian. Thank you for the invitation.
All right, that's Alan Sloan, a true OG of business journalism, and that is it for the latest episode of Opening Bid.